Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, and I am back again with another video. Today I'm going to be setting up my bullet journal for April 2019. My theme for this month is inspired by one of my favorite TV shows, Star Trek. This is actually the first Star Trek inspired theme I've done in my own bullet journal. You may remember I did an original series theme in my husband's bullet journal a few months ago, but this is the first time I've done any in my bullet journal, and I got so excited when I came up with this theme. I was sitting in bed, I was reading some of the suggestions that y'all had given me on my recent community post. I was also looking at some of the requests from my patrons, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just jumped into my head. And as soon as I thought of it, I knew that I had to do this theme, and I got so excited. So my theme for April is "There's coffee in that nebula." Now, if you're not a Star Trek fan, you may not understand the reference. This is a quote said by Captain Janeway. She is the captain of Voyager on Voyager, which is a Star Trek TV series. And she loves coffee. She talks about it pretty much nonstop. It's one of her defining qualities is how much she loves coffee. So I resonate with her on a very spiritual level. And there's one episode where they are running low on power, on what they need to power their replicators, which are basically machines that can create anything out of energy, including coffee. So she hasn't had coffee for a while, and they locate this nebula that has a potential energy source that they could use for their replicators. And so she tells them to head on in there to find that energy source because there's coffee in that nebula.
Magnify.
There are unusually high levels of Omicron particles within this nebula, Captain.
Are you thinking we could collect these Omicron particles to provide an additional antimatter reserve, Lieutenant?
Precisely.
Senior bridge officers, report for duty. Commander, set a new course. There's coffee in that nebula.
And overall, that's probably the moment I quote the most out of Star Trek. I think I talk about there being coffee in that nebula at least once a week, if not more. Ask my husband for confirmation. So as soon as it popped into my head, I just thought, yes, I am doing this. This is amazing. Because it combines two of my favorite things, space in general, but more narrowly sci-fi, and even more narrowly than that, Star Trek, and coffee. So while you may not be a fan of Star Trek specifically, if you like coffee and you like space, you can use this as inspiration to create your own drawings and spreads based on combining these two things. So I'm going to put a timestamp down below in my pinned comment for when the painting is over in case you don't do watercolors, you're not interested in the watercolor process, and you just want to skip to the part of the video where I'm actually setting up my bullet journal. So the first step in all of these paintings is to ink them. I want the ink to dry completely before I start watercoloring. I am specifically using permanent ink so that when I use watercolor near it or on top of it, it's not going to bleed. So I'm using my Sakura Micron permanent ink pens in various nib sizes for most of the inking, and then the large area that needed to be filled in, I just grabbed some liquid permanent ink so that I could fill it in much more quickly, just using a cheap brush that I didn't mind ruining a little bit. This first painting was inspired by an image I saw on Pinterest that was a paint bucket kind of pouring out a nebula. I thought that was a really cool idea, so I decided to kind of repurpose it for my theme by making it a coffee cup that's pouring the nebula out into space. So starting with inking that top section that's going to be kind of a standard black night sky, just regular space. And once all of that ink is dry, I'm going back in with my watercolors to fill the bottom half of the painting with a bunch of different colors to create the look of a nebula. I'm focusing on pink, purple, and blue to get my idea across, and I'm maintaining these colors throughout all of my paintings so that there's a little bit of a consistency throughout the spreads, even though some of them I'm making a little more dark and dramatic and some of them I'm going with a bit of a lighter hand. I still wanted them to feel like they belonged in the same nebula, maybe different areas of the same nebula. The nebula in Star Trek is more of a pinky color, but I thought it was a bit boring to stick with just pink, so I decided to include a couple other colors while still having some prominent pink sections. The other 3 paintings I'm doing are for 3 separate spreads. So the first one I'm working on here is a profile of Captain Catherine Janeway. So this scene happens, I believe, in The Cloud, which is episode 6 in season 1 of Star Trek Voyager. So in this section of Star Trek, her hair is worn in this bun at the back of her head with a lot of volume in the top of her hair. Her hair changes throughout the seasons, but I decided to go with a profile based on the hairstyle she actually wore in the episode when this happened, because I thought it would be the most accurate. I also feel like this hairstyle's, at least for me, the most recognizable for Captain Janeway, especially when it's in a simple profile. So I found an image of her profile with this hair and used that as reference so I could get the profile as close as possible. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think it does look like her profile, which is great. So again, I started with inking. I just wanted to ink the outline, and then I went back in to paint dark edges around the profile and then to paint the nebula in the center. So I used a really dark gray watercolor to kind of pull the dark edges in towards the center, and then again used my pink, purple, and blue watercolors to create the nebula inside of her profile. The next painting I'm working on is a nebula in a coffee pot. So I started out by inking the coffee pot and then went in with my watercolors to create a little bit more of a pastel feeling nebula inside this coffee pot, trying to leave a tiny bit of space between the nebula and the edge of the coffee pot, just so it looks like there's a bit of thickness to the glass. And my very last painting is just a coffee cup, sort of like the steam of the coffee is turning into nebula vapors. And this one is probably the one where I had the lightest hand. I went the most pastel because it is supposed to look a little more like steam. The very last step for all of these paintings was to add stars. For all of them, I started by flicking gouache off a small brush onto the page just to get a random spattering of white dots of different sizes and different patterns. And then I went in with a white gel pen to add a few more stars to make some of the stars larger and just put in stars in areas that I felt they were needed. As always, all of the supplies I used will be linked in the description box down below, so don't forget to check that if you're looking for something in particular. For the cover page, I wanted these stars to look a little more realistic, so I kept them to simple dots of different sizes. And I went with the same approach for the painting of Captain Janeway's profile. I wanted the stars to look a little more realistic, so again, I just stuck with dots of different sizes. But for my other 2 paintings, I wanted them to be a little bit more stylistic. So for those, I not only had dots for stars, but I also drew in little stars in different styles. I drew in a couple little constellations just for a little bit more interest. And in the coffee cup drawing, I also did a tiny little planet as well and a little shooting star, just again for something a little bit more interesting. Once I was happy with all the paintings, I let them completely dry. I actually left them overnight, and once I knew they were for sure fully dry, I scanned them into my computer, making sure to have the settings turned up so that they would be scanned at the highest quality possible. Once I had them on my computer, I put them into Photoshop and made sure that the colors were accurate to real life and kind of positioned them, resized them as needed, and then printed them out for use in my bullet journal. So for the cover page, I just printed it on a regular piece of paper, and then I went in on top of that paper to add the April header. I thought about doing this right onto the painting, but then I decided I wanted to have the original painting without the writing on it, just to have if we wanted to put it up in our house or something, and then to add the writing after. I also felt like it would be easier to add the writing onto a printed version of the painting because the paper is a lot flatter and easier to write on. So that's why I decided to do it that way, but you can of course do it right on top of your painting. And for the letters for April, I wanted them to look like constellations, so I just drew little stars at the points and then drew lines between them. Then I just cut out the painting and glued it onto my page. I tried to print it a little larger than my page so I'd be able to cut the edges to fit the page perfectly. And that's it for the cover page. Now moving on to the monthly spread, and I'm starting off with this coffee pot full of a nebula. I actually printed this onto sticker paper, and it's the first time I've used this sticker paper that you can print onto, and let me tell you, this is so exciting to me. I'm sure many of you have already used this and it's not that exciting, but I didn't even know this was a thing up until pretty recently, and let me tell you, my life has been changed, and all I'm going to be doing in my free time is making stickers. So just so you know, if you're not sure where I'm at, that's where I am. I'm making stickers for myself. But it also makes me super excited because it means that all of the printables that I provide to my patrons every month, if y'all get this sticker paper, you can print them at home and have your own stickers. And that is very exciting to me. So, by the way, all of these paintings that I did that I'm printing out are going to be available to my patrons. I have 2 tiers on my Patreon. The $1 tier, they get 1 printable every month, and the $3 tier, they get multiple printables. So this month, they will at least be getting these 4 paintings as printables, and then usually I also provide at least a couple from my husband's setup every month. So if you like any of these paintings and you want to use them in your own bullet journal, if you want these as stickers to use on your laptop or something, join the Patreon squad if you're interested in that. There's a lot of other awesome rewards, but I feel like the most relevant one to talk about right now is the fact that you get these printables, and considering sticker paper is my new discovery, I'm excited about all the possibilities there. So once I have the coffee pot stuck in, I'm going to go ahead and set up my monthly. I'm doing yet another different monthly setup, just slightly. So I've gone back to a slightly larger monthly than I did for March. I found my March monthly was relatively practical, but just a tiny bit too small for what I like. So I'm including stats on this page, both my YouTube and Instagram stats. I'm including 3 monthly goals, and then also a little mantra to follow. I then just ripped up some black construction paper to add to my page and used my white gel pen to do the lettering. So I'm doing April almost exactly the same as the cover page, though I changed up the A a little bit. And I also used my gel pen to write out the mantra on the black paper, which is everything I need is within me. I then went ahead and added a bunch more stars of different types, styles, sizes on all of the little pieces of black paper. Now I'm moving on to the next page, which is going to be my quote page. So again, I printed this Catherine Janeway profile onto sticker paper and just cut out, leaving a tiny bit of space around the sticker, peeled off the backing, and stuck her right in the center of the page. Now I'm adding the lettering, so my quote page, of course, is going to say, "There's coffee in that nebula," because that's the whole theme. That's just what it is. I'm first writing out all the lettering, just using a black pen, and then once that's dry, I'm going to go back in and add stars to the lettering using my white gel pen. Moving on to the next page, which is going to be my mood tracker, and I'm doing something very different this month, so I'm drawing 30 different cups of coffee, one for each day, and drawing where the liquid is inside each cup. And then each day, depending on my mood, I'm going to fill in the liquid section of the cup with the color that corresponds to my mood. And then I'll add little stars. So it's a bunch of different tiny little nebulas in cups of coffee that have colors that correspond to my mood of the day. Now that the ink is dry on the lettering for my quote page, I'm adding a bunch of stars onto the letters with my white gel pen. Then I'm adding the black construction paper to the top of the mood spread and writing out moods and adding some constellations in stars to that header, and filling out the 3 colors for happy, neutral, and sad for each day: pink, purple, and blue. And for these, I'm using my Tombow brush pens. Now I'm moving on to the final spread of the video, which is my first weekly spread. So I'm using my last painting, the coffee cup with the nebula vapors that I created a sticker out of, on my weekly spread, and then using black construction paper at the top of both pages so that I can use that as a background for the headers. I'm also adding my little habit section in the bottom right-hand corner and adding my little sections for my dailies along the left. This is, of course, my rolling weekly layout, which is the weekly I always use. If you're not familiar with this, I will link my video that explains the rolling weekly as per usual, so you can go check that out. This is when I had the idea to add black stars as well to this spread, so that's what I'm doing here. That's it. That is my entire setup for my There's Coffee in That Nebula theme for April. Hopefully, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, you enjoyed this combination of space and coffee into one theme. I am loving this so far, and I think this may be my favorite spread to date. I'm pretty sure I say that every single time, but I say it because it's true, and I'm really excited about this one. I want to take a moment to thank my lovely patrons for their support. I am so grateful for you. If you watching this are interested in the paintings I did in this setup and you want to get them for yourself, check out the link in the description to sign up to be a patron. Not only will you be getting printables every single month, but there's also a bunch of other fun rewards like monthly live streams, early access to videos, and a whole lot more. So there's a $1 reward tier and there's a $3 reward tier where you get every single reward. So for about the price of a cup of coffee every month, you can get a lot of goodies. So go check it out if you have any interest at all. I appreciate your support so much. As my patrons know, I recently quit my day job and am taking on YouTube full-time, so any little bit helps so that I can do my part to support my family, primarily my cats who eat a lot. So thank you to my patrons, you're the best. And that is everything I have to say for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell so that you know when I post new videos, especially because next week I'm going to be posting my husband's Plan With Me video and you definitely don't want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you very soon in my next one. Bye friends.